Has Pillsbury Doughboy gone on a diet? And is Betty Crocker on Ozempic? Or are your cake mix boxes just shrinking? Because they are. Okay, so the box looks the same, but what's inside is different. I'm talking shrinkflation, the technique where companies decrease what you get while keeping the price relatively the same. And cake mixes represent an important part of American culture and food history, and that's why downsizing is a bigger problem than you or I or even the companies realize. I'm going to share a little history of cake mixes, how they got so popular, and share some solutions on what we can do to stop the shrinking. Full disclosure, I wasn't someone that used cake mix much at all. In fact, this box I'm holding expired in May 2023. It's been sitting in my pantry for so long. But box cake is super popular, and I should be part of that demographic. I'm a dad with many small children, and they're always wanting dessert. And they aren't alone. Global cake mix sales are projected to almost double to $2.2 billion by 2030. I've been trying to get better and better at baking. I've been reading and researching different recipes and books, learning as much as I can. And I noticed this one recipe that I recently shared, that low-fat pumpkin cake recipe. Well, it called for 1 box of cake mix, but in the parentheses, it wrote 18.25 ounce box. And seeing that got me wondering, are cake mix boxes that big? I mean, 18 ounces, that's like just over half a kilo. And I walked over to this expired box sitting in my pantry, and I saw that no, boxes these days aren't 18 ounces. This is 15.25. Now, this recipe that I've been reading was 25 years old, and at that point, well, a lot has happened since then. Let's start by tracking exactly what's happening to our cake mixes. 35 years ago in the 80s, every major brand from Betty Crocker to Pillsbury to Duncan Hines. Here's an interesting tidbit. Well, Betty Crocker was a fictional character created by General Mills, and the Pillsbury Doughboy is obviously a mascot. Duncan Hines is an actual real person, a restaurant critic who licensed his name to everything from cake mixes to other food products. I did not know that. Anyway, these 3 major brands gave you 18.5 ounces per box. That was the standard. That's what our mothers and our grandmothers used. That's what many, many recipes were based on. But over the years, brands have been steadily shrinking that amount, and today, some boxes are down to 13.25 ounces. I'm looking at you, Betty Crocker. This is shrinkflation in action. Same price, less product. And you see it everywhere, from laundry detergent going from 112 loads to like 90, or toilet paper, 264 sheets to 244 sheets, or potato chips, giving you less chips and more air in the bag. And this isn't something new for me. I remember 20 years ago, fresh out of college, my friend was working for a large chocolate company in marketing and operations for their chocolate chip line, and he told me he saved the company something like $7 million because he reduced one flavor from like 230 grams to 213. It was like a weird odd number. A weight difference so imperceptible the consumer wouldn't have noticed unless they saw the number in the corner. By the way, I recently checked online for the current packaging of that product, and it's now 200 grams. And just a quick note on pricing. Now, I believe boxed cake shouldn't feel expensive. It's supposed to be an affordable convenience food. Now, I managed to pick up this Duncan Hines for 99 cents at an outlet store, and this Pillsbury one at the same place for $1.25, and this flavor at Target for $2.19. But sometimes you'll go and see a box for $3.99 or $4.99 at like a Kroger's or Vons or other grocery stores. It just sounds crazy to me. Before you get too angry about shrinking boxes and higher prices, let's talk about why cake mixes matter so much. Let me share the incredible evolution of cake mixes through American food history. Now, while other packaged and processed foods in the late 1800s and early 1900s can quickly come to mind as quintessentially American, like Heinz ketchup, Quaker Oats, Coca-Cola, Hershey milk chocolate, Kellogg's cornflakes, Oreos, the food industry, as seen through cake mixes, your Betty Crockers, your Duncan Hines, your Pillsbury, they really represented a leap in food technology with more sophisticated processing that aimed to dehydrate and stabilize ingredients while also maintaining flavor and texture. Cake mixes for Americans represented a convenience food made available in a radically shifting culture. post-World War II America was a time of increased suburban living, more affluence, and more women in the workforce. Laura Shapiro, in her book Something from the Oven, set out to answer the question right at the beginning, do women like to cook? And she ends by saying some do and some don't. What's clear now is that women in cooking are no longer a single entity. Now, I found this book a fascinating read on how this time period from the 40s to the 70s was for food and feminism. The early chapters focus on post-war food manufacturers aiming to replace the art of cooking with packaged foods, including cake mixes. The rest of the book delves into the personalities that either embraced this movement, like Poppy Cannon, or popularized home cooking, like Julia Child with her primetime show, The French Chef. It even touches on figures like Betty Friedan, who championed second-wave feminism by addressing women's dissatisfaction with their traditional roles as homemakers and cooks. And for a guy who cooks like 95% of all the meals for my family, it was really interesting to see how far we've come and where we go from here. But cake mixes aren't just convenient shortcuts, they're marvels of food science. Inside each box, you'll find carefully calculated combinations of emulsifiers, conditioners, and powdered shortening. It's why your cake comes out moist and tender every single time. I remember seeing an Adam Ragusea video 5 years ago on box versus scratch cakes, and I rewatched it recently, and I've put a link to it below. But he goes through the ingredients with a food scientist on what those fats and flours do to the cake. Also, he was the one who recommended Laura Shapiro's book. Thanks for the recommendation. There's a common story of how cake mixes got so popular. Now, it starts with the insights of Ernest Dichter from the Institute of Motivational Research around the early 1950s. Now, most of you probably heard that he suggested that manufacturers should remove the eggs so that women felt more involved in making dessert and less guilt for using something from the box. Now, this isn't entirely true, since using fresh eggs preceded Dichter's insights. The Duff brand patented a mix in the 1930s that used fresh eggs. And General Mills, with their Betty Crocker brand, went the fresh egg route on Dichter's recommendation, but Pillsbury waited much longer to remove the powdered eggs. The reason people wanted to use fresh eggs was because it just tasted better. The truth is, Dichter's insights were more about unlocking a creativeness in their approach to cooking and baking. It's not about saving time, but as Laura Shapiro writes in Something from the Oven, that women would form the ability to develop a skill for doctoring up the contents. Dichter outlines that she may spend less time in the kitchen and she may buy canned food, but she makes up for it by greater creativeness. Adam Ragusea, in his video, said something interesting.
I want a cake with these characteristics. I am baking from a box. But I don't always want a cake with these characteristics.
And he's not alone. I see what he's trying to say, but the truth is, most people don't want a box cake. They want a canvas to express their creativity. The reason for cake mix's popularity was how people were able to transform the box cake into their own creations. Shapiro even suggests that it was the frosting that helped catapult sales, as homemakers making cakes would make them look like football fields, or being able to glamorize, their word, not mine, the cake with unique ingredients. She even suggested the term doctoring up. Well, I happened upon not one but 2 editions of the Cake Mix Doctor by Ann Byrne with over 300 glamorized cake recipes, all of which started from a story by Byrne on the history of the cake mix in a Nashville morning newspaper that included some of her favorite recipes. And within 1 week, she received 500 recipes from people wanting to share their own cake mix creations. And then she did it again in the next week, and even more recipes poured in. Whether we like it or not, or really care to admit it, but cake mix is part of our food history. Your mother's cake recipe or your grandmother's dessert. I know for me, my mother made me a teddy bear birthday cake that was likely from a yellow cake mix box. For others, your childhood had a box cake somewhere in there. This is all to say that one of the main reasons cake mixes became so ingrained in American life was that anyone and everyone could use it, make it, and bake it. Married with children or not, career or not, single or a couple, everyone, because they were nearly foolproof. For the consumer like you or me, it means that even if you mess up the measurements a bit, add a little too much water, not quite enough oil, you'll still get a decent cake. Now try that with a scratch recipe and see what happens. Here's something that may or may not surprise you. Professional bakers use these mixes. There are Reddit posts anonymously admitting to using cake mixes when they're preparing wedding cakes. And you'll find any number of people on social media saying that as a professional baker, while they do make a lot of their stuff from scratch, they usually have 1 or 2 items that uses a cake mix. Why? Because they come out so damn consistently good. Because of all that science put into it. All those emulsifiers, powdered fats, and sugar make for one heck of an incredibly delicious, sweet, well-structured cake. So what do we do about these shrinking boxes? Hey, before I get into that last part of the video, I want to thank you for watching so far. This is a little personal, but speaking of shrinkflation, I thought I'd say that my job was recently shrinkflated. I was laid off at the beginning of the summer of this year, and I'm trying to focus on making more videos like this and sharing more recipes, and I'd love your support. It costs you nothing to subscribe, and if you'd like, you can leave me a comment. It keeps me motivated and helps me grow this community. Thank you. Back to the show. Well, some companies are already learning that you can only shrink products so much before customers fight back. Look at PepsiCo. They're actually putting 20% more chips back into select bags of Tostitos and Ruffles after seeing sales decline. Consumers spoke with their wallets and PepsiCo listened. More chips, less air. For now, cake mix bakers have developed their own solutions. Some buy extra boxes to top off their recipes back to the original amount. I mean, that's one way to boost your sales numbers, but others, they use a simple upmix recipe that I'll share right now. Take 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour, 1 cup of sugar, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, and mix it all together. And use 3 ounces as you need it by adding this to your store-bought mix. And you're back to the original volume. Problem solved, I think. The pros of this is getting back to those 3 ounces and adding a little bit of homemade scratch recipe to the mix, a little rustic creativity. But the cons are you're kind of messing with the magic a bit. You know, cake may not rise as much, be as fluffy, not as foolproof. Nonetheless, it's a workable solution that everyone can use. I guess that's the kind of sad thing about this. I mean, as corporations keep profits in mind, right? A little bit of Americana is disappearing or shrinking very slowly. And to what end? I mean, how small can these box mixes get? Maybe it'll be cakes for individuals and not for families. Maybe consumers will stop buying as much so that the Betty Crockers and the Duncan Hines of the world can put back 20% like PepsiCo did with their chips. And if I can end on this, I'm gonna use box cake more while I can. And for those that still think that box cake is cheating, it's a canvas for your creativity. And remember, it's somebody's birthday every day of the year, so there's always an excuse to have cake from scratch or from the box. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Not bad for a first try. And again, thanks for watching.